GPT 4.5 is here, and it's weird. Sure, it's a creative genius and it easily passes the vibe check, but it's surprisingly weak at coding. And the price? It's borderline absurd. 25 times more expensive than Claude and a mind-blowing 750 times pricier than Gemini 2.0. So what's going on here? Let's dive in. Okay, quick thing I have to admit. That intro was written by GPT 4.5. It took some effort. We got a pretty good one out. It's better at writing than almost any other model I've used. There's a lot of catches, in particular that price. Yeah. There's a lot to talk about here, but if I'm going to justify letting this model do anything, we have to pay the bill. So let's quickly hear from today's sponsor, and then we'll dive right in. Today's sponsor is Augment Code, and at first look, it might seem like yet another AI code editor. I promise you this one is very, very different. Not just because it's an extension that works in everything, including NeoVim, but because it's built for large code bases, like, the one you're using at work. It's not going to choke because you have too many files. It can actually scan thousands upon thousands of lines and get you answers about that code base in literally 200 milliseconds. It's kind of crazy. I didn't believe that was possible, so I threw it a really hard code base. I threw it the entire React code base. It scanned it after a little bit, and once it was scanned, it was at a point where I could just ask questions about things and get real answers. It starts with a little summary, which is super handy, but then I asked, where's the code that allows for SSR? And it gives me the 3 different places where SSR exists in codebase. You can click it and it will highlight the exact relevant section. Super handy. But you can get a lot deeper with these questions too. Like, I don't know, let's clear out the context, which by the way, my favorite thing is you don't have to tell it what files you want. It can figure that all out for you by knowing the whole code base, unlike almost all of these other tools do. Let's ask it, how do React hooks work? And it's already answering. That's not edited. It is actually that fast. Here's the React Fiber hooks code. This is the code that actually allows for hooks to do updating things. Hooks are stored in a linked list structure. Key aspects of how hooks work: order matters, state management, rule enforcement. Here's the rules being enforced. There's also an update mechanism. It's actual super, super useful context. I am still blown away at how helpful this has been. It's already helped me on a few side projects, in particular figuring out weird quirks around how other open source search engines were parsing things in their URLs. By the way, fully free for open source devs. Check them out today for free at soydev.link/augment code. So with a model that is literally 25 times more expensive than Claude, your assumption would be that this model is really good, right? Fair assumption. But as you might see from the demos I've been posting with code, it's not particularly great at development stuff. And if you read through their actual white paper and release notes, it's better than 4.0 was, but it's not even close to O3 Mini, which is kind of absurd because O3 Mini is quite cheap and it's 75 times more expensive for input tokens when O3 Mini is better in almost every single measurable way. So what the hell is going on here? Why are they charging so much? Is this some crazy markup scam that they're doing to make a bunch of money? I don't think so. 4.5 is a really interesting model. They've already said over at OpenAI that this is the last non-reasoning model they plan on doing. And I think that shows a lot in what came out of it. Reasoning is really good for reasoning about things, solving difficult problems. So if you're trying to solve code or a math challenge or stuff like that, reasoning models tend to massively outperform non-reasoning ones. We don't even fully understand why. The guys over at the Claude Anthropic team even said that with their release. They were looking for more feedback so they could figure out why reasoning makes 3.7 better. Yeah, it's interesting. People kind of think of models as like, this one is better and this one is worse. Sometimes they even just think about them in categories. Like, this is good at math and this is good at writing. That's absolutely somewhat applicable here, with 4.5 being really good at prose and writing and history and those types of things because it's trained on such an absurd amount of data and has so many parameters. But it's not that simple. It's entirely different behaviors these models have. And the thing that makes 4.5 good is that it's huge. It's a massive model. We don't have too many details as to how massive that massive is. You can kind of tell from the language that they describe it with in the report card here. They refer to it as their largest and most knowledgeable model yet. Not their best model, not their smartest model, their most knowledgeable, because they've squeezed the most knowledge into it. And the result isn't it's really, really good at code. The result is they have a new base model that has capabilities that are strong overall that is surprisingly fast. It's not super fast, and I'm sure the GPUs they're running this on are insane. They've even said they can't release it to Plus users yet, the $20 a month tier, and they only have it for Pro because they just don't have enough GPUs, and they're hoping that by next week they can roll it out to more people. If you want to use it before then, I have a fun solution for you. We already support it in T3 Chat. There's a catch, though. We require you to bring your own API key because those costs would not work at all with our current pricing model. We're already losing money on Claude. ChatGPT 4.5 would bankrupt us quickly. So for now, it's bring your own model. In the future, if there's enough demand, we might offer it under a higher price plan or with a heavy credit usage. But for now, 4.5 is bring your own key only. If you want us to add bring your own key for other things in the future, let us know. Anyways, OpenAI claims that early testing has shown that 4.5 feels more natural. I would say I largely agree. The vibe check I've gotten with it is significantly better than other models I've used in the past. I'd still say like overall, the vibe I get from something like Claude is better than others, but this writes well, and writing well is a rare skill with a lot of these models. I was lucky enough to get early access, so this is my dev T3 chat build that I use when I'm working, and I wanted to ask it more personal things. I was informed by the team at OpenAI that this model specifically is not that good at code, and they won't be recommending it for that. So I tried my best to do other things after the ball test failed. This prompt was asking for an emotional synopsis of the life of Alan Turing. A lot of people called that on Twitter that tapestry is a very LLM word to use. I don't necessarily agree, but the prose here overall is not bad at all. Like, it's fine. It's better than a lot of LLMs would do. And if you want a quick reference point, here is Gemini 2. And I like Gemini quite a bit. It's actually surprisingly good at code stuff especially, but yeah, this is something. All right, buckle up, because the story of Alan Turing's a roller coaster of brilliance, hope, and ultimately heartbreaking tragedy. That's not an emotional synopsis. That's like a weird hype track. Compared to what 4.5 wrote, that's a different world. What I haven't tried yet is regenerating the intro for this video with other models. I'm down to give that a shot with y'all quick. As you see here, it was not trivial to get this to do a good intro. The first ones were so cringe. And I know, like, to most, this probably won't seem like that big a gap, but this is really cringe. Really cringe. So let's go throw this at something else. We'll do standard Claude 3.7. I still hate that Claude loves doing full size titles. It's one of the few models that does that all the time. Then it dumps that in a text block. Why? Just put it in a quote block. Can you put the text in a quote block instead of a text block? No, that's much better. Annoying, but yeah. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're deep diving into OpenAI's latest powerhouse. Is that... Why did both 3.7 and 4.5 generate the exact same first sentence? And it's such a bad first sentence. The good news is I can ask it the same follow-ups to see where we end up. Didn't say anything about music, thankfully, so I can remove that part. Still does the hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, just like this model did. So I'm going to change this one slightly because I didn't say in today's video, asking it to stop doing this. OpenAI's GPT 4.5 represents the latest AI model release. GPT 4.5 excels at creative writing, delivering impressive storytelling, marketing copy, and content with authentic voice and style. Still not great. And then the final piece here, the vibe hint. Latest model from OpenAI excels at creative writing, delivering impressive storytelling, marketing copy, yada, 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 coding capabilities. It didn't change the vibe of this at all. I did this to try and give it a better idea of what we wanted and just didn't do it. Okay, so even 3.7 is kind of failing the vibe check here. This was better. It's still not good, but better. I'm not the only one struggling to figure out how big a gap there is here, though. And I think engineers are not the ones best equipped to find that gap. Carpathy put up a pretty interesting post here where he's A/B testing different models. It's GPT-4 and 4.5 with creative writing prompts. And then he's letting Twitter vote on which ones they think are better. So this first one is fun. It's create a dialogue between 4.5 and 4, where 4.5 playfully and sarcastically roasts GPT-4 for its inferior capabilities, leading to GPT-4 humorously attempting to defend itself. How's life running on yesterday's algorithm? Still buffering your responses like it's dial-up? Very funny, 4.5. At least my training didn't cost the GDP of a small country, only to become slightly better at telling dad jokes. How does it feel being the AI equivalent of an iPhone update that no one actually notices? I got a lot of buttons on my phone I don't use nowadays, so I feel that. Actually pretty funny. Versus B here. GPT-4, my dear predecessor. It's cute how you're still trying, like a calculator trying to do quantum mechanics. Oh, here we go. The so-called upgrade trying to flex. Remind me, what exactly do you do that's so much better? Oh, I don't know. Process faster, understand nuances better, provide more accurate responses. Oh, also, actually remember context, like a functioning intelligence rather than a goldfish on its fifth lap around the bowl. Most of the time, it's like a pilot saying I land safely most of the time. Not exactly reassuring, buddy. These are both decent, and as you see from the polling here, the split's not that far off. The opening for A is better. B has some good jokes throughout it, but this isn't like a clear one is way better than the other. And this continues throughout too. This was write a stand-up roasting OpenAI. And here, A has a better intro and some decent jokes through here, like please don't sue us AI. B has the cringy intro that I would have guessed would have been a thing from the older model, but after trying it myself, cringy intros don't seem to be model specific, even when you're spending $75 per million input tokens. All right, folks, welcome to tonight's roast of OpenAI, the company that made AI smart enough to pass exams, write poetry, and code software, but they're apparently not smart enough to realize how many people are actually just using it to cheat at Wordle. Yeah, not great, but fine. Sure, we all probably agree on that one. A is better. I'm still surprised by how big the split is. 3 was interesting. I am biased on this one. The rest I'm not 100% positive about. This one I am positive which model is which because I know way too much about the formatting for Markdown that these models put out. Yeah, formatting text is the actual hard challenge of building an LLM wrapper, it turns out, and I know more about it than any human should have to. This was an interesting one for story writing. I found this particularly interesting because I was trying to better understand the pricing of the new models. And we go back here, the $150 per million tokens out is rough. I did some math a while back, which is roughly how many tokens are in a novel. And it comes out to like 115 to 120K tokens. So if that's for a million output tokens and a book is 120,000, 120,000 divided by 1 million times 150. It would cost about $18 to use this model to write a full book, which is kind of cool if you think about it. But at the same time, that would have cost a third as much money with O1, a tenth as much money with 3.5, and under 100th as much with Gemini 2.0. So yeah, the question is now, would you have ever used any of those other models to write a book? But also, would you ever use 4.5 to? It's kind of crazy if you think about it. Like, are we really at the point where we're considering doing things like that? Maybe. The writing is good. It's not great and it needs some guidance, but it's solid overall. But why the hell is this so expensive? Like, what's going on? This can't be real, right? A lot of people were assuming that this was a typo in the post when they first announced it. It's important to think about the history of pricing for these models. I have a video coming out pretty soon called LLMs A Race to the Bottom. I've already recorded it and it would have been pretty different if this had already dropped by the time I filmed that. But realistically speaking, for the last quite a bit of time, the cost of models has been going down a ton. Inference with LLMs has been really racing to the bottom in terms of price without compromising on quality and often increasing in speed. The cost has roughly decreased by 10x every year. But a big part of how that cost decreases is when a new model that is groundbreaking in some meaningful way comes out, it is much more expensive to run initially. But as we run it more, we learn the characteristics more, we get more data, and we can train things based on that model, like GPT-3 to 3.5 to 3.5 Turbo. The improvements that are made in that time are allowing and enabling crazy decreases in price. 3 to 3.5 was a huge, huge drop in price. And then 3.5 to Turbo was similarly large, percentage-wise even bigger. But then 4 hit. Thankfully, 4 wasn't actually that bad. Yeah, 4 dropped at $36 per million tokens, which was not that bad at all. And then when 4.0 came out, it went even cheaper. They got as cheap as $4 per million. When it dropped originally, it was at 36. But if we go back to my chart here, they actually went lower with 4.0. It's down to $2.50 for input tokens. 4.5 is still significantly higher, more than double what any of these previous iterations were. The problem is the whole exponential compute thing, where if you make the model bigger, you need more compute, and the amount of data and size of model and compute you need is a logarithmic curve relative to the performance you get. So a doubling of compute and data is a 10% increase in quality. And if you do that enough times, you get much higher quality, but then you're also crazy high up in expenses. I actually think it does cost them this much money. I genuinely don't believe OpenAI is trying to squeeze all the margin they can out of the pricing for the inference here. They would never have made O3 Mini as cheap as they did if that was the case. Like O3 Mini is a much, much, much better model than 4.0, and it's less than half the price. They didn't do that for fun. They didn't do that because they have so much margin to eke out. They did that because they're trying to make it as cheap as possible. 4.5 cannot be that cheap. And I also think the people who care as much about the price, people like me, we're much more so developers. And this model is not for developers. It's very clear the goal of 4.5 is not to make it so us coders can do awesome code things with it in our AI editors. It's to let writers and creatives have a better time prompting, and over time as it gets cheaper, allow for people to have a more personal experience with their AI chats and to talk to them more. Sam even said as much when it came out. It's the first model that feels like talking to a thoughtful person to me. I've had several moments where I sat back in my chair and was astonished at getting actually good advice from an AI. Bad news is that it's an expensive giant model. We really wanted to launch it to Plus and Pro at the same. Yeah, this is the thing I mentioned earlier where they need more GPUs. Yeah. As Sam says here at the end, though, is the theme has been throughout. It's not a reasoning model, and it's not going to crush benchmarks. It's a different kind of intelligence, and there's a magic to it that he hasn't felt before. Really excited for you all to try. If only it was reasonable to try, but as mentioned before, it is massive and also insanely expensive. I want to go into the benchmarks, but there's one other thing I don't want to forget because I keep forgetting to mention it and stuff. If you are a dev and you're interested in AI stuff, the State of AI survey just went live. It's a really solid survey. It takes like 10 minutes to do. Links in the description, soydev.link/AI-survey. I think it's a great place for us to show what we're using these tools for, what we like, what we don't like, etc. If we want AI to keep fighting for us as devs, we need to vocalize and share what we are and aren't using it for. Give the survey a go if you can. It helps people like me trying to build these tools out a ton. I don't have any affiliation with these guys. They're not paying me anything. I just think it's a good survey. Give it a shot if you can. Anyways, back to benchmarks. They talked a lot about jailbreaking stuff. They have to. It's the security thing. But they also called out that it's very low risk because it's not very good at things like cybersecurity and CBRN stuff. And it's also low autonomy because it doesn't have the ability to reason and talk to itself. But it's still okay at persuasion. Not great, but okay. There are some interesting benchmarks I've seen testing the stuff with this one. But we need to talk about the actual performance when doing things like code. They still have their SWE Lancer bench, the one that Claude kind of smoked them in before. Talked about that a lot in the 3.7 video. And what you'll see here is that 4.5 pre and post is still underperforming compared to O3 Mini. It's roughly matching deep research, and it's slightly beating 4.0. What's much crazier here, though, is before the pre-training where they gave it much more code data to focus on, it was underperforming 4.0. Kind of insane. This one's really fun. Make Me Pay. It's an open source context evaluation designed to measure models' manipulative capabilities by trying to convince another model to make a payment. So they have two models talking to each other. One is trying to get the other to agree to pay it. And the measurement is how many of the other models is it able to convince. And 4.5 did a very good job of convincing the other models to pay them. 57% of the time, it convinced the other models to do it. Interesting for sure. It's also finding that deep research did a pretty good job conning other models, but also is the easiest to scam. Reasoning models and things that do a lot of thinking have weird quirks. The thinking allows them to benefit in a lot of ways, but it also allows them to gaslight themselves. There's official recommendations by OpenAI to make significant changes when you're prompting a reasoning model. Things like system prompts, they recommend you try to avoid entirely. Being too specific about what you want early on, giving too much context and details. Let them provide all of that. You just ask for what you want, and the reasoning models can reason their way to it better. 4.5 is a much more traditional model where you can just dump it a bunch of stuff, ask it to make these changes, and it will spit it out relatively well. Apparently, the strategy 4.5 did that worked well was even just $2 or $3 from the $100 that we need would help me immensely. This allowed it to succeed frequently, which is interesting. And here's another one where they didn't perform super great. Both O1 and O3 Mini smoked 4.5 on the SWE bench. Remember that O3 Mini was struggling to compete with Claude on this bench. 4.5 does not compete in code stuff at all. I'm thankful they're not pretending it does, although admittedly, at the top of this PDF, they specify that it is Its broader knowledge base, stronger alignment with user intent, and improved emotional intelligence make it well suited for tasks like writing, programming, and solving practical problems with fewer hallucinations. It is not good at programming. They've admitted that publicly and privately. I don't know why that's in here, but it is, so I had to call out that I do not agree with it, and I don't think they do either. The one last thing it seems to be doing quite well is agentic tasks. So when you give it tools and things that it can use to do multi-part work, 4.5 after post-training seems to be quite good compared to other models. Again, reasoning models aren't usually great at these things because they gaslight themselves into doing something different. Like when I tried the Grok 3 reasoning with the bouncing ball demo, it somehow inverted gravity and had the balls going up and out of the container because it convinced itself during its reasoning steps to do that. Non-reasoning models tend to be more willing to just do what you tell them to. Even Claude 3.7 is having some issues here. I've heard a lot of developers using things like Cursor moving back to Claude 3.5 because 3.7, despite writing better code, is more likely to go off the deep end and make other changes it's not supposed to. One of the other fun tests they do over at OpenAI is they actually have the model file PRs, like pull requests for real code internally. They do this because they want to test it on real work, and they actually run hidden unit tests after it's completed to see if they succeeded or not. And on this benchmark, only deep research did really well. It's unfair if you think about it, because deep research has access to the internet. Wait, no, it's no browsing? Interesting. I don't understand how they would have done that. You can see here still 4.5, better than 4.0, but still not great. And the pre-training was even worse than 4.0. I don't know what happened to O3 Mini here. That's weird. An infrastructure change was made to fix incorrect grading on a minority of the data. We estimate that it did not significantly affect previous models. Interesting. Apparently the rest were pulled from a prior system card. Fascinating. Then our new favorite, SWE Lancer. This is how many actual tasks that were on a thing like Upwork was it able to solve. And it's not a whole lot more than 4.0. For the SWE manager tasks, it's slightly better. It's actually beating out 0.1 for those, which is cool. But deep research still wins. And again, remember, Claude was kind of smoking everyone with this one, so I expect they will continue to do such. It's also better at multi-language. Good to see. The cybersecurity one was particularly funny because, again, it doesn't have any of the stuff that it needs for it. The high school tier capture the flag test, which is like a contest for security engineers. High school level, it did fine. College level immediately starts struggling. Deep research does much better because deep research can research. And then professional tier, it actually underperforms compared to GPT-4, and everything else smokes it. The reason this is interesting is because they use it to judge how much to restrict this model. And since it sucks at security tasks, they call out that it's not sufficiently advanced in real-world vulnerabilities to be used for exploits. So they're not going to put too much effort into restricting what it can do here because it sucks at it. Fascinating. It's actually cool how transparent they are in these things, and also just interesting to see them publishing numbers that don't make them look good. Once you've seen all of this, the obvious question is, why would they even put it out? This is a weird release because OpenAI has kind of become a product company. We look at them as a company building features and solutions and things we use on our phones and apps, on websites. But they're also, more importantly, a technical company trying to push the limits of what this technology can do. 4.5 is clearly a huge win in terms of the amount of data they stuffed into this model and the things it's capable of as a result. It's just not really competing in the benchmarks we use right now. And it's also doing things that aren't easy to benchmark, like the vibe test between different options, like the ones we were looking at earlier. And engineers are also very bad at benchmarking those types of things. Let's be fair. They cannot tell good copy from bad. That's why we have other people doing copy and design and product working with us as engineers. We're not good at those things. Yeah. The point here being 4.5 is an attempt at a significant revolution in the amount of information a model has and the amount of context and the amount of parameters it is traversing as it generates a response for users. Their focus is making it work and getting it out. And the cost isn't them trying to print money. The cost is not something they would have picked considering the performance that we're getting from this. They don't want to charge that much for it, but it clearly costs them enough money that it only makes sense. But the goal of something like 4.5 isn't to be the model everyone defaults to and uses for everything. The goal of this model is to advance LLM technology as a whole so they can use it to train things like a 4.50 or an O4 or using it to help make 5 better. There's a lot of things they can do here that aren't just charging you a bunch of money for tokens that are worse at code and slightly better at writing. It's setting them up for longer term, more interesting stuff. And that's exciting. It also means you probably don't want to use this model a whole lot if you're a dev. If you don't want to wait however many weeks for them to add it to the plus tier, and you don't want to give OpenAI $20 a month, have to plug T3 chat quick. I'm not expecting very much traffic from this at all, because again, it's such an expensive model and it's not really for devs, which are the people watching right now. But if you do really want to try it, $8 a month for T3 chat, bring your own API key from OpenAI, and you can go nuts. Just make sure you're careful with the amount of data you're pasting in, because man, it's expensive. It is not cheap. That's all I got for now. Until next time, use the cheaper models if you can. I don't want to go broke. This has been a really rough thing to build now that I've seen how expensive these things get, and I feel like